Consent.
I'm gonna share the screen.
Do I say both? Or do I just,
Yeah, no brainer.
for me?
Okay. Welcome everyone, to the February 12th, 2025, meeting of the Monroe County Land Bank Corporation. Unfortunately, Kevin, our chairman, at the last minute had an emergency come up and can't make it. So, he asked me to step in and with Anna as vice chair to run the meeting. So we will get started. With that, if we could do a, quorum, call. So Kevin Purcell, excused. Anna Liss,
Alice is here.
Amy Grandy,
Here.
Orlando Ortiz is excused as well. Deborah Campanella,
Here.
Robert Franklin. Hello. Thalia Wright. All right, so we have quorum and we can, get moving forward. So, with that, and Anna, if you want to run us through the, run a show, and I can step in when needed.
Sure, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and welcome everyone to the Land Bank Corporation meeting for today. Our agenda items, for February 12th are, first and foremost, the January 8th, 2025 meeting minutes. And then we'll go through committee reports and, we'll discuss news from the state that the Land Bank is in receipt of a grant from Housing and Community Renewal. So first and foremost, we're going to take a look at the minutes, and I'm going to ask for a motion and a second.
They sent out via email.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pat.
Any, suggestions, edits? I'm here.
Can I ask for a motion to approve
So.
and a second?
I think it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Motion by Bob, second by Bob. Next up, we have committee reports.
Can we get a vote on that?
Oh, yes, I'm a vote. Thank you. All in favor, please.
Hi.
Thank you. Committee reports. First, we've got, announcements and communications.
Yeah, so Anna said we received word last week that we received the LBI award, that we've been working on for a few months now. Typical New York State process, we have to get some things into them to finalize the contract. But we have a $100,000 grant for the first year that has a right to renew every year so long as we uphold our end of the bargain each year. That is for 3 years. That funding is really specifically targeted towards startup land banks, so it is for technical assistance. We need to hire anyone to help us, whether that is staff or consultants, services that we may need, whether that's, legal and other things. And then also it can be used for, hard costs as well if needed. We just need to make sure that those are clear. So we're working to get that done. We'll talk a little bit about, more about what that means. Some other communications that we received are, we received an invoice from the Land Bank Association for our 2025 dues, and that is for $2,000. I believe we budgeted for $1,500, so we might need to amend that, in our budget. I know. They unfortunately raised the dues, of course, between when we budgeted and when, that occurred. One thing I do want to share with you, and I'll send these out via email. I forgot to do that beforehand, but part of being a member of the Land Bank Association is attending a monthly meeting. And they have various things, but one of the things that they've recently shared is the fiscal year 26 executive budget highlights for land bank. So this is kind of a summary of what's going on at the state level, and then their legislative priorities. The Land Bank Association, one of the reasons we pay dues is because they do have retained counsel and staff to help us out, both in terms of our technical assistance, and then they advocate, of course, with the state, figure things out. So I will pass these around, but I will send out hard copies for everyone so that way, or digital copies so they can actually review them and learn about what's going on at the state level. With that, so that's the Land Bank Association information. And then we received an email. So we had a press conference, and at that meeting, the county executive mentioned that we have a website, and an email. One of the things that came into us, and Talia, you're probably familiar with this, is that the what is the entity here called? I can't remember. Oh, Making Hope Possible. Emailed us regarding, the potential to have furniture and other things in our, facilities. I told them that that wasn't really something that at this time we, need to worry about since we don't have any, buildings to worry about. But I told them I'd bring it to your attention, and I emailed them that we will be in touch if there's any need for their services. So I'm just gonna pass that around as well, and we can share that digitally as well. And then I think that's about it in terms of, communications. That is it, yeah.
I have a question about the Land Bank Association.
Yes.
I see the logo for Center State Corporation for Economic Empowerment or Opportunity, this Center State CEO. Are they nested inside of Center State CEO, or what's the relationship there?
Yeah, so they act as the staff for the Land Bank Association. So the Land Bank Association has, and I can pull up the financials, I can't recall what it is, but they have a contract with Center State's Corporation to staff that. So they have one member who's dedicated to managing the meetings, taking notes, following up on things, doing the accounting and all that stuff. It was a gentleman, I can't remember what his name was, Jonathan Link Logan, who has moved on from that position, and it's now Andrea Hahn, I believe. And so they essentially act as kind of an aggregating body and work with us to move things forward. So that's
Okay.
their relationship. My understanding is they did that through, a competitive process a few years ago or whenever they did, and that Center State has continued to do that. With that, we also get, I believe, Kevin Huber, or someone from Center State, acts as kind of an advocacy and legislative arm, and so they tell us about, they're the one who put together the, what's going on at the state level, and information that we can use to, be aware of what will impact us positively and negatively in the governor's budget. Yeah, of course. So to pay the invoice, which we don't have to worry about now, but we will have to have a motion to increase our budget, so I'll put that together for the next meeting. There's no hurry to do it today because we technically don't have money, yet, so we'll talk about that and figure out how to move forward. And then I think we can move on to the next thing, unless there's questions on any of that, apologies.
The next item is committee reports. First are finance policies.
So Amy, can you discuss the finance meeting since you're the chair of that committee?
Sure.
And talk about what you and the other members talked about? I should be moving forward on these slides. I apologize.
We have held a meeting to discuss the different policies and go through each of them. We're now looking at the travel, and some of the feedback that we've gotten is in regards to federal GSA standards that could be included in that policy. For procurement, we were talking about the discussion of best value inclusion in that process, as well as other requirements which could include and not be limited to insurance needs, delinquent taxes, among other things. In terms of the internal control and finance policies, we were talking about the signatory and secondary signatory, the approval process, and the accounting software, and what we would do in terms of procurement for that.
So with that, my understanding is that the specific changes you want, you will get back to us so that way we can send to everyone. And then at our next meeting, March meeting, we might actually have a draft that we can vote on to adopt. Potentially. Okay. Questions on that? I know, Bob, we talked a little bit about accounting software as well. We mentioned the ability, I know, the IDA and planning has used QuickBooks for various accounting, but there's also the possibility of using potentially something maybe internal to Monroe County. So with something we can explore with no real definite answer at this point. Anything else?
Do we need to make a motion on anything?
I don't think they're finalized yet. So if they were to have recommended that we adopt those policies, then we could have moved forward with that, but it sounds like there's some changes that want to happen.
Yeah.
So next month, hopefully.
So it's just a record for now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I believe that we can move on to the next.
Yes, our next item are our governance policies.
And Commissioner Wright, I believe you are the chair of that committee now?
Yes, thank you so much. I'll preface a ditto everything when it comes to the policies and, just for us not to adopt today, but we did have a few questions around it.
Yep.
So we were privileged enough to review, the defense and indemnification policy, the code of ethics, conflict of interest policy, whistleblowers and protection from retaliation policy. So if we can just kind of walk through our question, I believe that was, some of this may take a little bit of, legal consult, but, I think Josh, but really basic Josh.
Okay.
I think for the defense and indemnification policy, we were all good with it. Little housekeeping around, just being a little in around, grammar and pronunciation
Yeah,
and,
perfect.
some of those. So we will make those recommendations and send it back. Didn't have any questions on there, just around that. Codes of ethics, conflict of interest policy. We were pretty good on that as well. I believe we had just a couple of questions around the annual disclosure statements. Just a little bit of more clarification on, timelines around, when is the disclosures, due?
Mhm.
Who gets those? Is it a template? Some of us that work for the county,
Yeah,
Wimpy's,
yeah.
right? We want to do, is it gonna be that long disclosure policy, or are we charged as the governance committee to create something, working with Josh, but what does that look like? So that was more about clarification.
Yeah. It's a good
related
question.
to
I don't
that.
think we didn't come up with a template, but I would imagine it could probably mirror what have to do for Monroe County with some changes.
Yeah, or the airport authority, like there's a similar one for that you did.
So Josh, can you get us one of those versions that we
Yeah.
can circulate and then discuss?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we were good with that. And then around the whistleblowers and protection from retaliation policy, just some change in language, so it like consistently reads, like I think there was, remind me, Deb, like where it said director.
We don't have
We
employees.
don't have
Yeah, it
employees.
should include directors.
We don't have employees
Yeah.
yet, so that's why it does mention employees in the eventuality that we ever do.
Yeah, rather than having to adopt a new policy when we get it, if we were to.
We will
employ
utilize
someone.
that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
But wouldn't we want the directors to be included in that policy?
Yes, actually, yes,
Add
yep,
that.
yep, yep, okay.
Alright. And again, same thing around, so like, the paragraph related to complaint procedures. So the sentence reads, if the employee does not feel comfortable going to the board chairman, then the complaint should be taken to the audit committee chairman. We were wondering, because this policy falls under governance, should it be the governance committee? So just a point, something maybe we think about at the next meeting to decide.
Okay.
And
So the only thought for why not the governance is if they're not comfortable going to Kevin, who's the chairman.
Oh,
Kevin is the chairman of the governance committee. So that was,
no, sorry.
oh, but he's
typically-
on, yes, yeah. He's on the committee and I saw his name being on the committee, so.
But typically, it often governance and the chairperson of the board are very similar, so I think that is probably why it's done in there. But we could put something that's more flexible to make sure that there's a level of comfort for whoever needs to do
Yep.
that.
You got it.
Yeah, but that could go to, I don't have a problem,
Yep.
what committee it goes to,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought if governance
Or
is
governance.
overseeing the policy,
Yeah.
then maybe the process as well.
Yeah, I have no preference for which one it goes to, so it could go to governance and I can put some language that. But it will not be disclosed in the event the chairman is on that committee or something to that effect.
Or maybe it should read something like, a committee that does not include the chairperson.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay, and then this is just like little logistical things around the investigation and maybe not for, the policy itself, but something to think about, like, how we said audit committee chairman or government, so who truly does the investigations, and we had a lot of conversation related to the policy itself, and do we need to create like some type of investigative procedure? Right, what to expect through, if you send a closeout template letter, just, basic. process these
Mhm.
things. And other than that, did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. The only thing I had a question about was the defense and indemnification. It seems like this language was pulled from an LLC. Because it refers to member, and I think that should be changed to director.
Yeah, that's just a typo,
Yeah,
so, yeah.
okay. Other than that, nice job.
Oh,
I'm actually very impressed that you all read these in depth,
I know.
like, that's like.
That's our job.
I'm very impressed with that committee and discussed them.
So once again, we'll take the input. We'll try to get any answers or mocked up versions that we can out before the next meeting. And then if we can circulate those in advance, maybe we can adopt at the March meeting, which would be good. But if not, we can continue moving forward at the pace that is comfortable.
And if you have any little nits, housekeeping, or questions that didn't come up, you can send them to Pat and me so that I make sure that when I edit them, they get into the next version before March.
Kevin said he was gonna redline it for you.
Yes.
That works too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So I think with that, we can move on to our next item of business.
Yes, thank you. Our next item of business is the LBI Award Next Steps. A few bullet points that we'll go over here with Pat, including establishment of a bank account, procuring purchase insurance, contractor bid solicitation plan, MWBE and EEO policy statement, and having Chairman Purcell sign and notarize the grant agreement.
So,
Pat.
couple things, although this is meant for startup funding, they recognize, that, we may not be there just yet. But there are some basic requirements. We of course need to have a bank account to be able to accept the money at some point. They need, certain forms upfront with that information. They also need certain insurance forms as well as a part of the agreement. And so we are working through that internally in terms of what we can do inside Monroe County and what we'll need to go through outside of Monroe County. One thing we have been doing since our last meeting, Lisa put together a bank account, essentially large spreadsheet that you have here, comparing different options. No particular reason as to why these banks were at least reviewed. Some of them we have existing relationships with, either personally or professionally, and some are just local that we thought would be good to review. Maybe premature to, make a decision, but essentially what we're trying to compare is, what are the costs of any of these bank accounts? What will they offer to us? Our banking needs, will of course change as we move through this process. So what we know now will likely differ. We are planning to have a call with another land bank that is of similar stature to figure out what do they really need for their banking needs and then report back to you. But what we have here is just kind of a list of the different options. So that way you can know, what you could do. If anyone has any experience at any of these banks that they, would like to share, that would be helpful as well. Because this is a decision that the board will need to, authorize and have us move forward on. So with that, let's open it up to discussion and we can talk about any of these specifically, or we can leave it, for a conversation at the next meeting.
Hey, I like the idea of talking to another similar sized land bank because they'll be able to say whether they had a good experience
Yeah.
with a small credit union or a larger bank.
Yeah.
Usually the larger banks have more fees and less personal attention in some instances. And so a local bank would be a nice partner. A small local bank, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's advantages to all of these different companies. Some of them will have more expertise, some of them not. I know, the county deals with Chase, so we have existing relationships there. But there's a difference between a $1.5 billion entity and an entity that will probably have tens of thousands of dollars in its account.
Okay.
So that is something to, keep in mind.
Right, and actually, this might be just off key with everything else when we're looking at the features, but the thoughts around banks that are in our community that really are invested in community revitalization, really building up community. I don't know if there's opportunities with some of these banks like maximizing where maybe like, for example, I got my first home loan through KeyBank.
Mhm.
And if we had an account there and do the whatever program or first-time home buyers rather passed on. I don't know if they utilize a specific bank. Is there an additional partnership or something we can build? Maybe they're willing to do something with for that person around, right? The down payment of the home, or leveraging the funding where they just love what we're doing and we invest additional dollars. I know ESL has a community fund that they do that as
Yeah.
well, but that might be outside of the purview of that. But
Yeah.
Like a
it was just a
public-private
thought.
partnership.
Shan, can you speak to any of that? Based on your experience with the home programs that you deal with?
Housing council uses.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
It might be good also if we speak to other similar sized land banks, as Deborah pointed out, we can find out, do they have have they explored any kind of innovative public-private partnership model with a community bank to that end? On the big bank side of things, and just out of curiosity, I was wondering why M&T Bank isn't on the list for analysis.
Likely just because we ran out of time and we limited it at some point.
Okay,
So if there is a desire for that, we can do that. We have time.
no, I was just curious. I'm sure it's similar to some of the other.
They may have lending opportunities as well.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I don't think we aren't in a position to, put out an RFP or something like that and say, who wants to bank us? Because unfortunately, we just don't have enough knowledge about what our needs are and what our banking is. At least that's my opinion. If someone thinks differently, please let me know. And we're not necessarily bound to the bank forever, but it would be good to not have to switch in a year or so.
Or first bank with low fees.
Yes, exactly. So you can review this in terms of figuring out what are those banks that may have the lowest fees, but also still serve our mission. There are some practical considerations in terms of double signage and things like that. We aren't a traditional entity where it's easy to bank, and we potentially could be high risk. So there's things we need to consider there as well. So with that, I don't think that we can make a decision. At least in my opinion. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that? I hate delaying these decisions, but we unfortunately couldn't get it to you any sooner than this for a variety of reasons. And I am, you'll see in some of the communications from New York State, of course, they want us to get this agreement executed as quickly as possible. I have communicated with them that it's probably going to take us a little more time than they would like just because of the new nature of our work. They have stated that makes sense. They've dealt with that with other land banks. So we may take a little longer, but they have given us grace to do so.
I think we, the members of the staff, need to have a conversation with Jennifer Cesario, who's a county controller. I mean, realistically, I will share, we have not made decisions on who's going to do the day-to-day business process for the land bank. Not decided on, are we buying Great Plains or QuickBooks or using SAP and several months from now, Workday, when the county makes its transition. I think those decisions can impact who you bank with, frankly. Monroe County has relationships with Canada Bank, eBank, Five Star and Chase Bank. I will say, if the land bank wants to use the county's SAP system, Chase is the way to go. We get a daily banking file. We do electronic payments. For those instances when we have to print a check, we have secure check stock, and we have the micro printers to produce the checks. I mean, I think the land bank would be getting into all those purchases as well. I know we're the early stages. The idea is to grow and become bigger. I think I agree with your comment. You made a comment about just because you choose a bank today doesn't mean you'll use that bank a year or 2 years from now. I think a decision we make around staffing and accounting systems, a decision today could be changed a year or two from now. I'm frankly looking for the easiest, minimize the burden on staff. I mean, we're full of county staff here. And the way to do that is Chase Bank and the county system. And I'm just gonna tell you, you're not gonna pay a fee. The account will be set up, it'll be blended with the account analysis that the county has. And I mean, obviously I can't put words in their mouth, but I'm experienced enough that I'm just gonna tell you, you're not gonna pay a banking fee.
So with that, Bob, can you please, start that conversation with Jennifer, so that we can figure out what that would look
I
like?
will, and we can, whoever, you're the treasurer, you ought to be there, and
Yep.
whoever.
Yep. Yep, finance committee members should at least be aware of it, so that they can participate. And then based on that conversation, we can bring it back to the whole full board at the next meeting, figure out what that looks like, and then we have most of the other information. So we can then kind of have a thorough conversation and make a decision. Does that sound, plausible?
Sounds like a responsible decision.
Yeah.
And I do think it's okay to, recognize that we are really just getting started and we need a little handholding. So if the county can provide that and it's not, too much of a problem, and it gets us the easy win, to your point, I think that's a good way to move forward. So that way we can start off on, a foundation that is not necessarily ours, but gets us moving forward.
And if you grow like Comida, you break off, right?
Yep. Okay, so with that, the only other summary is that we will continue to conduct a lot of this work behind the scenes to try to figure out, to get this signed. Ideally, by our March meeting, we will have enough information to make some decisions and then potentially have, Kevin sign this, as authorized by this board once we have the full information. We have printed out the, agreement from, the Homes and Community Renewal. It's pretty standard fare. There's not a lot of room when you get a government contract, but we do have copies that you can take home if you'd like to take a look at that. And I think with that, that is, all of the LBI information I have to share. Is there anything else, Lisa, that we talked about that I'm missing?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Questions on that?
The way the grant works is you spend the money and then you get
Yeah.
reimbursed, right? So we'll have to spend from the money that we've already allocated, but we allocated 75,000, correct?
Okay. We are exploring how to, essentially bring in dollars, because both our ARPA funding and the, LBI funding are reimbursement based.
Yeah.
But we hope to have a little bit more flexibility with the ARPA funding, so we're exploring that right now and hoping that that will be the path forward.
Okay.
But yeah. And then, Josh is setting up a conversation about insurance, so that way we can at least get some initial estimates. Depending on how much, the initial estimates are, we then may have to go out to an RFP and things like that. So we just want to get a ballpark before we actually go to the work of an RFP. That sound agreeable to everyone?
And really, at this point, it's only gonna be DNO because we don't actually own any property, so.
Just general
The
liability.
general liability, yeah. There's not.
Understanding the scope will increase as we proceed.
Yeah,
Probably won't take that long to put in place if when properties become available.
No, yeah.
right.
And I mean, with the way that I'm at, if we are fortunate enough to find any properties through the county's property auction, that process takes a while. So even if we identify a property to take on, there is some lag time between when that happens and it officially becomes ours.
Well, and a lot of the individual property, the values of the places we're gonna be taking, the individual property insurance are gonna be low
Yeah.
enough that we're not gonna have to go to RFP probably. So. I mean, they could be $1,000, $2,000 or less easily.
DNO in part is based on revenue, so what the
Yeah, and-
operations are.
Yeah, we've, we've had, similar entities have very low D&O insurance, as
Yeah.
little as, a couple of $1,000s. And other entities have, $20,000 of
That's right.
D&O. So it really, to your point, depends on what we're working with, and so we anticipate it will be quite low as well.
Yeah.
At least at the outset. Go ahead, Bob.
Does the county law department identify us employees as board members? At least,
You mean the county insurance, not the county audit?
when we get sued, are you or John Bringwald going to court?
Or Maria, that's a question for John and Maria, okay, if Maria's going to, yes, I get, okay. That's a question, that's John, yeah, that's a John question, I assume the answer is yes, but I don't know the answer to that.
Actually, got a lot to do.
Yes. Keeping you busy.
So that's everything I have related to LBI. Is there any other business? Anything else anyone wants to talk about?
I heard from the trades that there's interest, once we are up and running. And we have projects and properties identified, that skilled trades are interested in partnering with us to see if they can get some pre-apprentices or apprentices on some of those jobs. So we can have that conversation when we are in a position to discuss. I just wanted to share that for the group.
Okay. With that, our next scheduled meeting is Wednesday, March 12th at 4 p.m., same place. We will, I'll get to the last meeting here. I apologize, that should say, March meeting. But board policies, if we're in the place to adopt them, I'd like to do that. Any LBI next steps, ideally, we would like to be able to have a return packet for New York State, authorized at that next meeting. Bank account, potentially authorized as well, however that goes. And then I have on here spring property auction, just to simply have it as when is that coming up? What can we start talking about? So Amy, we may not have anything, we can remove it, it's just a thought.
Like April and May, isn't it?
When we have the surplus?
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually try to have it in March, so I'm not paying for mowing, because it'll be gone by June. That's just how I roll.
Are there any other thoughts about what we should potentially add to that agenda to make sure that we keep moving forward? I wish we were moving a little faster, but this is the reality right now.
I think you put insurance on there, probably because, hopefully in the next week or two, at least a discussion about whether Brown and Brown makes sense or if we need to go out to other ones.
Okay.
Cause we need that in place to get
Yes, we do.
to get the funding, so.
The other two things that,
The other thing was the attendance of the ABO meeting.
okay. To Josh's point, the other couple things that we do need to have in place as well, which I will circulate before the next meeting. We need a MWBE procurement contract or policy in place with the LBI agreement. And then we need a EEO policy in place before that as well. So I will circulate those, so that way you can take a look at them and we can potentially adopt those and have the whole packet potentially ready for the March meeting. And then Lisa's reminding me that we had the ABO email going out about everyone is required to attend those trainings at some point during the year. It doesn't have to happen in this first session. Many of us have signed up. They are already booked. So if you haven't signed up yet, they are now pushing us into, what were the dates?
March 12th and 19th.
Okay.
Is that procurement policy for the LBI only applied for LBI funds?
I mean, generally.
Because we have another procurement policy that you look, so I'm
Yep.
just, kind of, we might have to disaggregate and decide what to use with the LBI funds and what isn't.
Generally, that is how, in my experience, the different funding streams require different.
Yeah.
requirements. You can make them all the same to make your life easier, but if there's one that is onerous or challenging, you can then.
Gotcha. Okay.
The other thing that I apologize, I was out most of last week, sick, so I didn't get a chance to finish it, but I did do a look at, excuse me. the acquisition and disposition policies across the board. I looked at what we included in our original packets to you, and I don't think it's appropriate for us for a variety of reasons. I looked at every other policy across the state. I have prepared that in a document that I can share with you, once I finalize it. Really, there's two models. There's the model that we shared with you previously, which is called the or I will call the ABC model, which is that it was in an era where you could potentially actually make money off of the land bank properties before the Supreme Court decision. It was designed that you would purchase A, properties, which are high quality, B, which is mid-range, and C, which is the low range. And so you have a acquisition policy that is designed to have a mix of those. So that way you potentially are working in a sustainable fashion. That is not realistic based on my experience and conversations with other communities. There's just not enough A and B properties to make that work. And then second, due to the fact that of the Supreme Court ruling that reduces the amount of surplus that we could keep, it's just not realistic. So I don't suggest that we follow that policy. The other policy is what I'm going to call the Albany model. And that is slightly different. It just takes away that ABC focus. And then within that, they have listed some of the different disposition strategies that are based on kind of the programs that they want. So that is something that I hope to get to this board way too early for us to understand all of those programs, but it's just helpful to look at to know what different land banks are doing. And so I will have kind of a memo outline for you before the next meeting. So that way we can take a look at that and potentially have that policy with you as well, which is why I didn't send it previously. So apologies for that, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Hope you feel better.
I'm feeling much better, thank you. All right, I think that's everything. I apologize for running a little long at the end there.
Apologies necessary. The next item is for me to ask for a motion to adjourn and a second as well.
So,
I have a second.
I second.
I'm just gonna sit here waiting for a second.
Deborah, seconded by Amy, all in favor.
Hi,
Thank you all.
thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Onwards and upwards. Oh, of course. No patting for spouse, but.
You did a fine job.
Thank you.
you can't make it look too easy though, for Kevin.